Welcome back to the Dirty Shirt Podcast. I'm Braden. This is Season 2, Episode 11. And we're off like a canceled artist's music. All right. As you guys can see, I am all alone today. This was something that we decided we wanted to do early on when we were talking about Season 2. We decided somewhere around the middle was a good time to do it, to give you guys a bit of a break. A lot of the episodes recently have been really long, so I'm going to try and keep this relatively short. We're each going to have a single episode here, so I'm going this week. Nolan will be going next week. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy them. They're going to be a little bit shorter, and yeah, I'm going to try and be respectful of your time and not just be rambling. We've both put a little more prep work into these episodes because it'll be less conversational and more, I guess, informational or, content will be more driven rather than ambling. I got myself some notes here, so I'm going to try and stick to those pretty well. Before we get into anything, though, we are in my room. Got my drums up here. I do play drums. My dad has his drum set up, so I practice on his drum set. So don't think these are just sitting here unused. And I use them for, if I ever go play anywhere. I also have my guitars up here, and my cajon. And behind me on my right is my disc golf stuff. So I sat here specifically so that if what I plan on going through doesn't take long enough to be like an episode that is worth something, I can yap about those things for a little bit, because I do have plenty to yap about with that. Got a little candle here. It's actually running out. I'm curious if that's going to last the whole time. But yeah, before let's get into this. So, as you know from the title, we are going to talk about separating art from the artist, which, whether you should do that or not, whether, talk about, secular point of view on that and Christian point of view maybe. We're going to get into, hopefully talk about this intelligently. And one of the hardest things about this conversation is that it is very personal. And your decision on this subject is very personal. And that can be difficult to talk about then, because if you disagree with somebody on a subject that is very personal, it's hard not to take a disagreement personally. So I want to start off by saying that these are my thoughts. I did a whole bunch of research yesterday, and this is something I've been chewing on for a minute. And so I'm going to have I have a bunch of articles here from a bunch of different sources, and I'm trying to get as many perspectives as I can on this. So, what does that mean? Separating art from the artist. Basically, there's a dilemma that we are in this current day and age. It's been around for a lot longer than, right now. But one of the reasons why it's a lot more prevalent now is because of social media. But what is the problem? So, art. Art is something that everybody encounters daily. It's out there. Music, paintings, pictures. You know, art can be a lot of different things. I don't have a lot of wisdom on the extent of that. I think there's people out there that would say like anything you do with intention um, and a certain amount of expertise could be considered an art. The way that Steph Curry shoots a basketball is art, in my opinion. Um, you know, there's plenty of things like that out there. The problem is art is done by humans. Humans oftentimes do bad things. And you have people out there who have created incredible art and also do and say incredibly horrid and bad things. So that's the problem. How do we engage with the art of somebody who has done things not good? How do you do that? Do we purely engage in the art and ignore everything that the artist has done? Do we get rid of the art completely? Or do we just engage in it and feel guilty about it? Who knows? Let's give it a couple of examples of these. One that's been very prevalent over the last couple of years is Kanye West. Whether you like rap, hip hop music or not, it's pretty undeniable that Kanye West is a culture changer. He has produced some of the greatest albums of all time. I think he was like one of the first hip hop and rap artists that I listened to that like really got me into that genre at all. I was a guy who didn't really listen to anything like that before Kanye, and started to get into it from that a bit and some other things. But he, has said and done some pretty terrible things the past couple of years. He is a bit of a interesting case because he has a lot of mental health struggles. I don't think that his mental health struggles give him an excuse for what he has done or said, but it does give a little bit more insight into what's going on behind the scenes there. I don't know that full story. I'm not planning to get into that really. I'm more planning to look at the question as a whole rather than a specific example. But it's also interesting that this issue is becoming more prevalent and talked about now because of social media. And anybody can get online and say anything that they want, within reason, and everybody can see it now. And there's a lot of stuff that gets said that nobody sees. There's a lot of zero view videos on YouTube. I'm sure there's a lot of zero viewed tweets on Twitter or X or whatever. But artists, people who are popular, everything that they say gets put under a microscope, and that's just the way of things because everybody can see everything now, and a lot of people have opinions on what people can and can't say or do, which I don't think is entirely bad. I don't think it's entirely good either. Yeah, some other quick examples. J.K. Rowling created Harry Potter. Harry Potter is huge. It's everywhere. But J.K. Rowling has said some nasty things about people. Again, don't really know much about that situation, but it is pretty popular. Two other ones that are from, a little bit farther ago, just to, prove that this has kind of always been a problem. Hitler, very bad guy, was also an artist. Famously got kicked out of art school or not accepted to art school or whatever. But he has some paintings, and to somebody who doesn't know anything about art, they look pleasant to the eye. Obviously, Hitler, not a good guy, but his art is kind of pleasant to look at. I don't know. An example of this, separating art from the artist. I'll get more into that. Fritz Haber was known, well, he did a lot of things. One of the things he did was create chemical weapons knowingly. And they were terrible and were, one of the most horrific atrocities in one of the world wars. I don't know which one. And that sucked, was really bad. But he also was one of the people who figured out how a process for putting nitrogen into soil, which is why we as humans can create enough food to support our current population, which is huge. So, yeah, a lot of people wouldn't be alive if it weren't for him. A lot of people would be alive if it weren't for him. Tough. Yeah. So there's probably going to be a fair amount of cutting around in this. I have been known to not be very great at getting my point across when my point is something that I have a little bit of anxiety talking about. I'm not going to get into all that, but just be aware of that, as I might be cutting around a fair bit. I'd like to acknowledge two things also. Been a lot of acknowledging and whatever. Number one, I don't have my opinions fully fleshed out on this. And so, somebody might say something that completely changes my point of view or perspective on this, or how I feel about it because of their point of view and perspective. If that happens, great. And also, historically, I'm really bad at, sticking to my guns and how I feel about a subject when somebody brings up a dissenting opinion. But I do, this is something that I know a little bit more about now, so maybe I'll be better at that. And I'm trying to be better at that. But I don't think that also you should be closed-minded. I try to keep an open mind. And so if somebody does bring up a point, I'm going to consider it, especially dissenting opinions. Yeah. I have not done extensive research on this. A lot of how I'm thinking about things currently has been derived from what I've looked up from, both sides of the argument. And I'd like to do some more of my own research based on, some other things. And we'll get into that. But sources of information is important. This is another little tangent. I have a really hard time with modern media. A lot of people watch Fox, a lot of people watch CNN, and take what they're saying completely at face value without acknowledging the fact that these are extremely biased news outlets that absolutely have an agenda on both sides. And while that doesn't mean that the information that those media sources are putting out is incorrect, but it absolutely is something that is needed to be taken into account when viewing what they have to say, especially when they're talking about opinions. And even when they are talking about things that are fact, how both of these sides frame certain subjects affects how you view the things that they are talking about. It's called propaganda. Everybody learned about it in school, but I think a lot of people forget. And so I'm not saying that everybody has to go vet every source of every single piece of information that they take into account, but it is something that you have to be aware of, because there are people out there who are trying to lie to you. They are trying to take advantage of you. And one of the ways that they do that is through media. So yeah. So all that being said, everything that I was looking up for this, I've tried to, look into those sources of information. Doing that, vetting your sources, I think is more important, for different things. If I'm looking at basketball information, and getting, or hearing about who the Phillies are, talking about and like trying to trade for or whatever, I'm not necessarily going to care as much about where the information comes from as I am about, a political view from some news source that I heard, because political view might influence, the way that I act, the way that I vote, the way that I do something. The Phillies are just the Phillies at the end of the day. I am sitting next to my Phillies dugout that my two grandpas and dad made for me when I was 8, I think. But at the end of the day, they are just the Phillies. So yeah. Take with that what you will. Yeah. And one more thing before I get dive super into this. I want to hear your guys' opinions on this. Everybody who, I think I have a personal relationship with pretty much everybody who's listening to this. If I don't, hey. But if you don't feel comfortable commenting on wherever you're listening to this on, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, text me please. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. I don't have my opinions fully fleshed out on it, and I want to know your thoughts. If you think I'm way off with something, let me know. I'm going to give all the links to, all the web pages that I've been looking at this stuff on in the description of everything, so you guys can go look at all this stuff for yourself. This is something that you should form your own opinion on and not just listen to what I have to say about it. It's a conversation that I think needs to be had more, and people often feel, scared to bring it up because it's a very personal subject. So, all right, let's get into the first article that I was going through here. So, this is from the Suffolk Journal, which is from Suffolk University in Boston. Your school, your paper since 1936. This is from Elise Coelho, staff writer, April 23rd, 2024. There's going to be a lot of names in these things that I'm going through. I'm going to do my best to pronounce them, but, sorry if I get it wrong. So one of the first statements that she makes, and this person is in the view of, yes, we should be separating art from the artist, is that many skeptics argue that art is solely personal, an expression of one's feelings. However, I believe that art is also social, reflecting society at a particular point in time and culture. Even though it incorporates the artist's personal experience, once it is published to the masses, it becomes a masterpiece of its own. So, this is kind of more along the someone who's thinking along the lines of, once I put my art out there, it no longer becomes my own. The act of somebody else experiencing that art solely changes that art because they are not me, and the way that person interprets it is going to be different from the way that I intended it to come across. That's the thought. So this person is saying that not only is that a fact, that is, true, they're saying that also here, consuming art from a critical perspective entails recognizing its duality. Once released into the world, someone's work is not solely theirs anymore. Art needs to be separated from its creator to be rightfully judged and critically analyzed. Separating art from the artist is possible when one realizes that art is more than someone's feelings on a canvas or page, but an abstract reenactment of society. So, yeah. Let's, before I give my thoughts on that, let's look at a dissenting opinion here. So this is from the Commonwealth Times, the independent press of Virginia Commonwealth University. Somebody named Kofi Imframa, a contributing writer, October 27th, 2022. And their piece is called Separating Art from the Artist is Impossible. So, their dissenting opinion to this is the reason why separating the art from the artist is a cop-out is because artists are their art. Everything they create is an extension of themselves and a glimpse into their identity. I think something that makes this conversation really hard to begin with is that you can't really disprove either of those statements. I think what's interesting about both of these opinions is that they end up coming to the same conclusion. So let's go back to the first one here. As harsh as it may sound, terrible people can be great artists, and it does not mean people should stop consuming it, but rather consume it from a critical point of view. Pointing out what they like and what the artist should improve is crucial for their growth. Saying that, look, you can still, appreciate what's going on without agreeing with the message. There we go. And then here we have what the person of the second dissenting opinion is saying. The truth is that we need to be honest with ourselves about whether our connection to a controversial artist's work is greater than the gravity of the things they've done. Instead of avoiding these uncomfortable truths, we should face them head on. For example, if West's music speaks to you and you don't want to give it up, acknowledge that while still holding him accountable for his actions. The line that tells us whether to boycott an artist over an issue is often ambiguous. Given an individual's personal values, what may be unacceptable to me might not be to you. What remains true, though, is the need for accountability. We should expect more from those in the public eye, and they should be reprimanded for harmful behavior. I find it really interesting that both of these articles are titled completely dissenting opinions. No, we should not separate art from the artist. Yes, we should separate art from the artist. But they both kind of end up in a similar spot. I think the person with the dissenting view is maybe a little bit more saying that, is probably more harsher of a decider than the first person. But at the end of the day, you're still picking and choosing. And you're still using your own personal judgment about whether or not you're going to engage with these things or not. So, that I think is very interesting to me. I had a third one here. This is from Adarsh Badri, July 30th, 2022. This is from his personal blog. He has like a doctorate, something from some college in Australia, I think. I'm going to link it so you can go, look at this for yourself. But it's just too complicated to separate art from the artist. The answer to the art-artist conundrum is deeply personal. There is no way to produce a collective moral standard to arrive at a conclusive distinction between art and the artist. That being said, we can also not sufficiently establish that the artist is what provides value to the art. And the art-artist conundrum, he wrote, or she wrote the artist-artist conundrum. I think they meant art-artist conundrum. Individuals hold a moral compass for themselves, and they arrive at a solution. And there may be no answer to this debate. I'm probably more along that line. Yeah. So I thought it would be interesting to bring it way back. I have a somewhat of an interest in Stoicism. So Stoicism is a philosophy. I think a lot of people, when they hear Stoicism, the first thing they think is, oh, it just means you're supposed to stay completely stoic and just not react to anything that's going on around you, and whatever's happening doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Where that's not what it is. I'm not going to pretend to have a perfect tagline for what Stoicism is. It's a philosophy, so it can't really be boiled down to that. I think the easiest way to think about it for me is that it's more about not letting your feelings have full control over your thoughts and especially your actions. Um, so it's about, maintaining control and self-control. I think it's very interesting because it has a lot of parallels with Christianity. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control in Christianity. And Stoicism is similar to that. But we're going to be reading from Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman, who was writing these thoughts around 170 to 175 AD. So this is Marcus Aurelius Meditations, translated by Martin Hammond. So here we go. Say to yourself at the start of the day, I shall meet with meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, and unsociable people. They are subject to all these defects because they have no knowledge of good and bad. But I, who have observed the nature of the good and seen that it is the right, and of the bad and seen that it is the wrong, and of the wrongdoer himself, and seen that his nature is akin to my own, not because he is of the same blood and seed, but because he shares as I do in mind, and thus in a portion of the divine. I then can neither be harmed by these people, nor become angry with one who is akin to me, nor can I hate him. For we have come into being to work together like feet, hands, eyelids, or the two rows of teeth in our upper and lower jaws. To work against one another is therefore contrary to nature, and to be angry with another person and turn away from him is surely to work against him. So that's from Book 2 of the Meditations, and it's the first one in Book 2. That's pretty a lot. The part that really was standing out to me there is because he shares as I do in mind. The way I'm kind of gleaning that is he's talking about mind. He's talking about, conscience, the fact that this person also has a mind, also has sentience, also has conscience. And thus he shares as I do in a portion of the divine. Divine is an interesting word. To me, growing up as a Christian, divinity for me is God. Shares in a portion of the divine. But Marcus Aurelius was by no means a Christian. He was a Roman who followed pagan gods. So I think the thing that's interesting here, though, is their want to have a higher power. I'm reading this divine as, intrinsic value. To Marcus Aurelius, what I'm getting is that intrinsic value is there because that person is human, because that person has conscience, has sentience. But I personally believe that every human has intrinsic value because they're created by God, which also means they're human. People saying similar things, but, interesting. Anywho, this I don't think is necessarily perfectly aligned with the, arguments that we're making. This is more, dealing with people who you don't like. which I think is along the lines dealing with art, things that we experience day to day from people that we don't agree with. This is saying that to work against them is or be angry is not good. But that doesn't mean that you should agree with them or, just do whatever. But it does mean that you need to work together to further humanity, to, get to the common goal of living, which I definitely agree with. So yeah. Reddit. I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on Reddit. Is a place that has a lot of bad on it. But, sometimes there can be some good conversation. So I have a link to a Reddit post about should we separate art from an artist in r/stoicism. So, this is all people who claim to be Stoics on the internet talking about Stoicism, which is interesting because we don't know any of those people. I always find it strange people who argue with each other in Instagram comments, Facebook, whatever, because it's really hard to grasp what a person means in what they're saying from text, and people get very upset about in comment sections. So it's important to try your best to engage in things like Reddit, and I think the internet as a whole, from a perspective that this is the internet at the end of the day, and a person can say all they want about how great they are at being a Stoic and whatever, at being a Christian, or they can say all these things, but whether they're actually doing that and doing those things behind closed doors or off the internet in their day-to-day lives, which is the thing that matters, is another thing. So, anywho, you can read whatever you want on that. If you think that's silly, don't go to it. Anywho, Reddit's a terrible place, but also has good things also. So yeah, those are all perspectives from sources that are by no means Christian. I am a Christian. I do believe in God, and there's a lot of Christians out there who claim to be Christian that I think have warped perspectives on a lot of things that are going on in the world, and that's a difficult thing. I by no means am claiming to have my thoughts on everything that's going on in the world completely figured out from a Christian point of view, but this is something that I've thought about and is something that I've done some research now on, and gotten some opinions from people who have done a lot more research than me. Yeah. And those of you who are listening to this that are not Christian, I would encourage you to, listen on and see if you disagree with anything that I'm saying when looking at this from a Christian point of view. Again, I want to hear your thoughts. I sincerely care about what people have to think about this subject. It's something that I find to be very interesting and valuable. That's why I'm talking about it for 100 hours, 40 minutes. So yeah, here we go. I think before we get into the conversation of separating art from the artist when it comes to a Christian point of view, it's important to look first at how we as Christians engage in art at all. There's, people out there who are of the opinion that Christians should not even be remotely, going to movies that are not expressly about Christianity or honoring to God. You shouldn't be listening to any music that isn't worship music or giving glory to God. It's all, bad. Um, I'm not of that opinion. I have found, and some people who agree with me, so that means I'm right. That's a joke. But I do think that these people have a better head on their shoulders than I do and have their thoughts more fully fleshed out on it than I do. So I'd like to go over some of those opinions. Because if you, as a Christian, don't believe that we should be engaging in, secular art at all, then this question of separating art from the artist shouldn't really have a problem because, a lot of, maybe we'll get into that. Oh my. Okay. This is from Fathom, Drew Fitzgerald, October 10th, 2016. Fathom, I don't know if they're like a news source or more of like a collection of blogs, but yeah. They're a Christian organization. Art is brought into existence by people, so all art communicates something. We aren't surrounded by benign expressions of art, but the declaration of what a person esteemed to be truth. Because Christians are a people called to be ambassadors for Christ, firmly planted in the world, but with a different message, we must then be active evaluators of art. If we can evaluate art, we can evaluate our culture and begin to engage the culture with the message and beauty of Christ. We can neither barricade ourselves from the world nor divorce ourselves from our culture. Both endeavors borrow the thinking of an infant without object permanence, thinking that if we close our eyes, the world and all that is wrong with it will disappear. Christians must go and participate with all variety of art in both enjoyment of aesthetics and praise or critique of its message. As Jesus said in Matthew 5:13-15, you are the salt of the earth, but what if the salt loses its saltiness? How can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they light it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Christians don't curse the darkness. Sorry, this is back to this guy's thoughts, done with the verses. Christians don't curse the darkness. They rush headlong into it with the light. It is my desire that we would share the beauty we find and work to redeem the brokenness art often communicates. We will only accomplish this if we actively engage in the work of artists with enthusiasm, kindness, interest, and appreciation. Boom. So yeah, I think that is a pretty good summary of this. I think the use of this verse is really cool here. We, as Christians, I think a lot of the time want to make a stand by not engaging in something, and I don't think that puts off the correct message. I think that makes us look like we don't care about the people who are creating the art, or that we think that they're inherently bad people, which we are all bad people. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But that's not how, I think we are called to love. I think we are called to love by sacrifice and by putting ourselves in situations with people that we don't agree with. Jesus ate with sinners. Yeah. I think this is a great verse, and I really like it in this context. Not that I think that I'm taking it out of context by putting it here. I think that this is one of the contexts that it's meant for. Here's another one. This article is titled, "Should We Engage in Secular Art?" This is from New York, which I think is like Renew New York. kind of, by Amy Pan on March 11th, 2023. Happy birthday, Talia. That's her birthday, and it's the day before mine. First of all, the sacred / secular mindset is not a helpful way to think. This compartmentalizing school of thought actually creates divisions, so that what is godly is strictly Sunday worship, ministry, Bible, and everything explicitly Christian. Then everything else is thought to be secular or ungodly. Monday to Saturday, watching TV, eating food, hanging out with friends, etc. It's just not true. So she's saying all those examples of things is secular or ungodly or wrong, something you shouldn't be doing. And she's saying that that's not true. As for consuming non-Christian art by non-Christian people, we say yes. All humans are made in God's image. Regardless of belief, we are all creatures seeking after our Creator. God did this. This is Acts 17:27. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. Back to her words. We all ask questions about the meaning of suffering, the limits of love, the purpose of pleasure, and more. These universal questions drive your favorite movies, TV shows, books, paintings, comics, plays, and more. Non-Christians still make art that moves us towards God. In fact, I like to think of the surrounding verses of the previously mentioned Acts 17. So this is the verses around that verse previously stated. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring." Acts 17:22-28. Back to Amy's thoughts. What's incredible about this passage is he literally quotes their culture. He references their religious sculpture, and quotes their poets to make an argument for the Christian God. Clearly, this secular art points to the sacred. Final statement that I have in here from her. God has sovereignly and purposefully placed you in this time and culture. Engage in it prayerfully and don't be afraid. God is always speaking to us, and art is a way of seeking him. So, yeah. I think it's important also now to take a step. And I don't know, my candle's kind of going out. It's almost out. We'll see how long that survives. I like to take a step back now. Actually, I'm just going to replace it right now. So this new candle that I'm putting in is like just a little bit too small for my thing. So my thought was if I put it in this wax, then the wax might cool and make it stand up straight. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, that's kind of working. Time to light it. Oh, that's a little bit warmer on my arm because I think it's a little closer. But yeah, that worked pretty good, I think. Yeah, all right. Maybe I know what I'm doing. Although, if all this wax goes down to here, it's probably going to get bigger than that tray. problem for a later date. Or time, rather. Probably later today when I'm editing this and putting it up tomorrow. Where was I? Yes. So let's take a step back from this real quick and say, I don't think that these people are suggesting that we should, as Christians, be going and creating secular art. Engaging and creating are two very different things. I also don't think that when they're saying engage in secular art, that when a rap song comes on and they're saying expletives and using the Lord's name in vain, I don't think it's saying that we should be saying those things just because we're singing along with the song. But what I do think that it's saying is engaging in that stuff is not only not bad, but something that we should be doing, because not only does it this art speak to questions that we also as Christians have, which can help us grow closer with our relationship with God by causing us to seek him deeper. But it helps us relate to non-Christians. And that is our ultimate goal, is to make more Christians. The only way to do that is by talking to non-Christians and engaging with them. So I got a CD today as a gift because it didn't come in the mail with my other stuff. And I was showing it to my grandma, and if you're listening, this Mimi, hello. And I was like, yeah, this is by Tyler, the Creator. I don't think you would like it. And she goes, well, then should you be listening to it? And I said, I actually have a lot of thoughts on that. So yeah, Mimi, yes, I do think I should be listening to it, for all the reasons that I've previously stated. So this is from Sarah Bariza, June 4th, 2019. She seems to be a worship leader, and it's important that this is what she is saying here is within the context of something that is being chosen for a church service. So her blog post was titled, I don't separate art from the artist. As I select music, I take into account many factors, including the composer. The composer is far from being the only factor I consider, but it's an important one to the congregation I serve. I strive to make my choices spiritually beneficial to the congregation and would never want to distress someone in the church by my musical selection. I agree that all of us sin, but I also believe that some sins have very serious public consequences. So yes, a murderer and I are both sinners, but the murderer's sin of murder carries a far more serious and public consequence. I don't think it's being judgy to make that distinction. Yeah, so I think the context is very important here. And I would agree. I don't think that we should be playing Tyler, the Creator music at camp or in a worship service because I think that those places are dedicated to, worshiping the Lord. Trigger warning. An example of this and something that's been on my mind recently is Michael Tate, former member of DC Talk and of the Newsboys afterwards. There's been a lot of things that came out about him that he owned up to and has confessed to, mainly including sexual harassment stuff. And that's really difficult for a lot of people to talk about and hear about. I personally, when listening to music by him recently, have had a hard time with not thinking about that. And it's really sucks because one of my favorite songs, contemporary Christian music song, Jesus Freak by DC Talk, has Michael Tate in it. And has kind of tainted a lot of like music that I really like, Christian music that I really like, because for some reason, this is something that's very personal to a lot of people, and this is a case where I can't get past the weight of what he has done. I especially get frustrated with hearing about, sexual abuse in the Christian community, because it's like one of the main things that has driven a lot of people away from the church. And so, in my opinion, it is one of the things that we as Christians should be guarded most heavily against, and guarding each other most heavily against. And the people that are preyed on, the victims in these situations. So yeah, I get really frustrated hearing about this stuff, angry. And so yeah, Michael Tate one has been tough. Yeah. Yeah, I actually haven't listened to much of them since this stuff came out. It was actually just this past summer, since these things came out about him, and he owned up to them. So yeah, let's move on from that. That was a specific context. Let's finish off with somebody who's looking at this more from a biblical perspective, and at the question at its heart again, more than specific cases. Should Christians separate the art from the artist? By Daniel Blackaby, January 28th, 2022. Scripture clearly establishes that the ability to create works of artistic excellence and beauty is not restricted to only the faithful. All people are created in the image of God, so it is unsurprising that unbelievers stumble upon truth and goodness through the arts, just as they have in the sciences and every other arena of human experience. When describing what Christians should fix their minds upon, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." It's Philippians 4:8. Christians should affirm the good, the true, and the beautiful whenever and wherever they find it, even when it is produced by the hands of disagreeable people. That's talking about this in the same way that we've been talking about the whole time. What I really like about this article is that it brings up a different perspective. We're talking about good art made by bad people. This one also brings up bad art made by good people, or, Christians in this context. Unfortunately, the church can often be poor or shallow judges of art. Many Christians celebrate the agreeable rather than the excellent. They lavish praise on a faith-based film about the power of prayer or the sanctity of life, not because the film is artistically commendable, but simply because they agree with the theology or morality being espoused. In the Bible, whenever artistry is described, there is always an overt emphasis on the work being skillfully done. Exodus 31 is an example, 1 Chronicles 28 is an example, and 2 Chronicles 2:13 is an example. Character matters, but so does artistic excellence. Separating the art from the artist allows the church to affirm godly character while also cultivating a standard of artistic excellence. Here's the final thoughts that I have in here from this guy. Artistic excellence should be a universal language, a common ground for people of all religious faiths and worldviews. There are plenty of valid reasons for a Christian to avoid art created by non-believers or bad people. The fact that the artist adheres to a different worldview should not, on its own, be one of them. The church should be first in line and the most vocal to praise the good, true, and beautiful wherever it appears. For all goodness, truth, and beauty ultimately reflects and points toward God. this kind of touches on some of my thoughts about the current kind of landscape and quality of music that has been that is being played and sung in churches and on Christian radio and everything like now. I find a lot of it to be not up to a standard of artistic excellence. Um, that's something I've struggled with over the past couple years, and not the point of today's episode. Maybe I'll talk more about that later when I've done a little bit more research on it. But I think that's an interesting place to start, and something. Finally affirming some of the feelings that I've been having about this over the past couple of years. Again, just because somebody also thinks the same doesn't mean that we're correct. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well. But yeah, I think it's probably time to wrap up my thoughts on this. So I'm going to do my best to do that. I think from many different perspectives, from a secular perspective, from a Christian perspective, it is good, okay, and I think the correct thing to do to separate art from the artist. I do not think that means that artists should get a free pass for the things that they have done. I think that everybody should be held accountable for, things that they have done wrong. But that doesn't mean that we cannot engage in their art, because art, I believe, is separate from the artist. And even if it's not, at the end of the day, the weight of what somebody has done might not outweigh how much that piece of art means to you. I think that this is something that is personal to each individual. I think one of the problems in this debate is that people are not willing to accept the opinions of others. And at the end of the day, this is a subjective issue, not objective. And anytime that happens, there's going to be discourse about it. There's going to be people that don't agree. And the biggest problem in this debate, and I think the entire world, is that people are not tolerant of a dissenting opinion. So yeah, I don't know. That's a lot harder to say in this case because it is a very personal issue for people. So, like I said before, dissenting opinions on this are taken personally because it is how you personally feel, which makes sense. But I don't know that it should be. And again, it's easier to say than to actually not take offense. But that's what I got. So if you agree with me, cool. I'd love to hear it. If you disagree with me, cool. I'd love to hear it. Text me, comment if you'd like to. I probably don't want to have lengthy conversations about this in the comments of the video. Maybe I would. I don't know. I think I'd like to have a personal conversation rather than an online one. But if you do want to do this in the comment section, let's do it. Hopefully we can all be respectful and still love each other afterwards. So, yeah, I love you guys. I am currently at an hour and 26 minutes of recording, so we're going to find out how much it gets cut down and how much of it was me going, because I'm going to cut all that out because I respect your guys' time. So I'm going to do my best to cut all that out. Sorry if any of this got edited weird, but yeah, I love you guys. We'll see you. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. You'll be with Nolan next week. So enjoy his episode. I know I'm going to. And yeah, love you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for washing. and do your laundry.